Oh, there we go. Now we're recording. Hey, welcome everybody, guys, to the Barbell Nerds podcast. I'm co-host Sean Fantuzzi with my other co-host, Will Rattel. And we are happy to welcome Chris Hayes to our podcast today. Chris, thank you for spending the time in our unsponsored podcast. Oh, I kind of sponsored by Sprint Timber right here. Mike Tucker, shout out. Ken Clark, shout out. And any energy drink that'll have us. Chris, tell us a little bit about Chris Hayes.
Yeah, Sean, thank you, man, for the introduction. Will, thank you guys for having me. Currently, I am the Director of Basketball Performance officially at Coppin State University, going into year 3, season 3. Of course, knock on wood that we are able to have one. And, for those who know me or follow on social media, I was kind of in a transitional period where I was actually going to leave Coppin and kind of go private sector for the time being and start my own deal. But we were able to have some really, healthy and productive professional conversations, negotiations, whatever you want to call it, especially with the women's staff having a new head coach and a new staff that came on that side. So long story short, I have decided to stay at Coppin for at least another year, another season. And, so far things have been great and really excited to continue on here.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How was that, if you don't mind me diving into that a little bit, because that's a pretty interesting route to take, the basically like starting your own business as a strength coach. It's slightly daunting, but at the same time kind of exciting.
That's exactly how I would describe it, man. It was scary to lose a weekly or bi-weekly paycheck that can pay the bills, and fortunately the way it worked out, I actually never stopped getting paid, so that worked out from a financial standpoint. But yeah, it was scary, but also exciting because it's the idea of like, okay, I can not work if I don't want to, but I'm not going to get paid and be able to pay my bills and feed. I don't have a family yet, but feed myself. So it was exciting. I kind of only scratched the surface of it. I am still trying to, on the side, still kind of build a name and a brand and a following, just through some virtual clients and things like that. So still kind of a side hustle right now. Coppin State is definitely the number one priority, but I look forward to that. I always thought of that as a potential path, like 35, 40 plus, kind of not a retirement deal, but hopefully when I have a family, don't want to travel as much, work crazy hours. That was always like a potential plan off in the distance later in my career. I never thought at 27 I'd be trying to embark on that. So, but no regrets, man. I'm happy with the path as it ended up and excited to see where it goes now.
Yeah, dude, good luck with that stuff, because I know Sean and I are both kind of diving into that as well. We're both trying to put out some content out there and build a little bit of a brand and hopefully find another way to just get some secondary income. So what's been your strategy as far as taking that personal side business? What kind of plan have you really used to try to build that brand, so to say?
Yeah, I mean, well, to be honest, man, it's because, again, I am staying at Coppin and never actually moved on because it was kind of a 2 weeks and then 2 weeks more and then 2 weeks more. And then it was, okay, I'm going to stay. So I never quite got to that full period of, okay, I don't have a salary. I don't have a paycheck. I need to go all in on, CH strength as I'm, calling it. So I've only scratched the surface of it. And so in terms of formal marketing, advertising, or paying for any of that stuff, I haven't done any of that yet. And for the foreseeable future, I don't think I plan on it right now. I do want to work on a website, just from, sure, a side hustle standpoint, but also just branding and content and, podcasts like this, being able to put that on there to build a following and a tribe, as we call it, or community. So more informal like that, honestly, like the handful of virtual clients I have right now, which I use through Team Builder, which has been great. Shout out to Hewitt and those guys. That's all just been through word of mouth. Like, of the 7 or 8 people I have, it's all like a friend, former athlete, family members, things like that. So and it's funny because as strength coaches, sometimes we frown upon like, oh, you shouldn't have a side hustle, or, oh, you shouldn't want to make a lot of money. And early on in my career as an intern GA, I'm like, okay, tunnel vision, 60, 70, 80 hours a week at my full-time job. And now it's like, I'm 27 and I don't have a lot of money in my savings and I'm still living paycheck to paycheck almost. It's like, what's wrong with building some of that side hustle and living a little more comfortably. So just from a professional standpoint, I feel a lot more comfortable with it now. The staffs at Coppin are really supportive of, supporting me with this stuff. So again, not doing anything super formal in terms of building it, just kind of one day at a time, 1 week at a time, doing some programming and slowly trying to reach out to different people and just really kind of a grassroots approach.
Love it.
That, dude. You mentioned kind of your younger years as a strength coach, and Will, both he and I, we've all gone that route where we're not making a lot of money, but we're diving head first, all into our internships or GAs and what have you. And I know you've had a pretty cool build up in the strength and conditioning community. I know you're at Louisville, and I know you and I got introduced basically when you were at George Wash. Why don't you, and you've spoken very openly about your time with such great mentors. Why don't you just share a little bit about those mentors, what they've meant to you, what you've learned, some of the best or worst advice you've ever gotten?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, even before GW, I'd be remiss to not mention, I know I don't always mention it, but just some private sector internships I did at sports performance facilities. The first one being at Summit, which I believe is shut down now, but in Philadelphia, and then a couple different places along the way. That really, GW was my foundation as a collegiate strength coach, but some experiences before that with some great coaches and mentors really helped prepare me for GW. And then played at Slippery Rock, played basketball as a walk-on, started as a manager freshman year, and then got the itch to play, and coach gave me the chance to walk on, and 12th man, played in 6 games over 3 years. But that was a good experience just to go through the collegiate athlete grind and prepare me for putting student athletes through it. And then GW under Matt Johnson, as well as Brandy Walker and Dan Raimondi. They're awesome. They're also close friends to me now. MJ and Brandy especially. I talk to them on probably a weekly basis, text, call, whatever. GW was, he's the man. Anybody just talk to him, he's always willing to get on the phone and talk shop. He might go for an hour or two, but it'll be worthwhile content. So yeah, man, he's great. I consider him a close friend now, as well as Brandy. And that was really just about getting my feet wet, man, going out and programming and not having him really nitpick. We had a lot of conversations behind closed doors, but he really just allowed me to go out and be a coach and make some mistakes and learn from it. And that prepared me for Louisville under Tina, who's now with the Kings, but, was at Louisville for about 15 years and really built that from the ground up with, an awesome staff there as well. And, GW, I thought I was the man and I didn't think I knew everything, but I'm like, man, after year 2, I'm a good coach. I'm doing it. I'm killing it. I feel great, confident. And then I got to Louisville and I was like, we don't really care about any of that. This is how we do things. You're intern, professional paid intern, and here's what you got to do, and here's how it works. So it was very humbling, man. And I think most people that I've talked to have gone through that professional internship, mentorship. During it, you don't really love it. I didn't love it, and Tina knows that. But afterwards, it was like, okay, made me a lot better. It kind of sucked at times, but I'm a lot better for it. And Louisville, the biggest thing I took from that was just the systematic approach that Tina and that staff had. There was a system and order of operations for everything, and I think, of course, the strength coaches, whether it's annual planning and programming, whatever, we can all appreciate that, and then after that was the Dodgers, briefly, a little under a year as well. Also in a paid internship, kind of mentorship role in the minor leagues. And again, just really smart people and really good people there. Everyone up from even to the farm league director, come in, Chris, what's up, man? Shake your hand, pat you on the back, just really, really good people. And of course, a really good organization as well. And the biggest thing I took from that was everything was based in principles. You can have programs and systems and templates, but as long as it's based in principles, you can just take those principles and then apply it to whatever you're doing. So that was the big takeaway, man. And then went from all the way out in Phoenix, Arizona with professional baseball to all the way back to the East Coast with Coppin State basketball. So it's been a journey, one that many strength coaches can relate to on some level. And I'm happy to have my feet planted for 3 years now, going on 3 years.
Very cool. Very cool. That trip is a little farther than I made out towards the Midwest, but definitely happy to be back on the East Coast.
Little nicer weather where I got to go to.
Very true. There you go. That's home. That's home for Will, though. That's home.
That's
Oh, yeah?
right. Yep. Minneapolis, and now I'm in North Dakota. So,
Okay.
oh,
Okay.
yeah.
God bless you, man.
Thank you. So you have background playing basketball. Do you find that helps with creating trust with players you work with now, or do you think it doesn't really matter that much? What do you think?
Yeah, so much, man. And of course, I'm biased because I did play. And by no means do I think you have need to play the sport that you work with to be a good coach or a good strength coach at it. Of course, there's plenty of strength coaches that fit those shoes. But I think if you do have it, it really can help. And for me, literally day one, I think it was day one or day two that I got to Coppin State. Mind you, I drove from Phoenix on like a Tuesday, got to Baltimore on a Friday, literally parked my moving truck in the parking lot, went up to the building, and coach said, "Coach, you ready to lead the warm up?" Like, it was like that. And one of our best players, who's now
Which is the worst part of our jobs.
Oh, yeah.
It was like dap, hug, coach, great to see you, so happy to have you. Hey, can you lead the warm up? We're about to start. So that's a story in itself. But that day or the next day, one of the first days, one of our best players at the time, who's now a grad student for us, fifth year, DeJuan Clayton, great kid, great player, great student athlete, and I think has a long pro career ahead of him. And you know me, I know who he is. I know how good he is. So like, I'm trying to not impress him, but make sure I get off to a good start with him, right? And I'm just rebounding and passing him the ball, and he's like, "Yeah, I can tell you played." I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, just the way you passed it to me right there, how you flicked your wrist." And so like just that immediately, day one, day two, whatever it was, resonated. And then, you know, just in the weight room, man, with exercises, with cues, like in RDL, a hip hinge is a great movement, but talking about how the better they can load their hips when they land or, you know, pivot or whatever versus just loading their knees. And of course, every basketball player has had jumper's knee, tendonitis, whatever, you know, just relating on little things like that. Doesn't have to be super intricate or sexy. I think, I do think it really helps, you know, and that's just to add to that a little bit. That was part of the reason I enjoyed my time with LA. And I loved training baseball players because I loved the intricacies of the shoulder and the rotational components and all of that. You know, baseball is unique in that sense. But I felt like my potential in baseball would be limited because I didn't play. You know, I only played
Right.
basketball from like fifth grade. And so the conversations that I can have with basketball guys or girls at Coppin, I couldn't even touch, you know, college, let alone professional. You know, with pitchers talking about different pitches, hitters talking about approach, like I couldn't even touch that stuff. And not that you need to be able to as a strength coach, but again, I think it helps. And so that's where I'm like, okay, maybe baseball isn't going to be right for me because of
For
I
that.
think it
sure.
does. I think that does play a factor. Just not necessarily it's a huge factor, but it does give that. If you've played, it does. It gets you a little bit more comfortable. Like I didn't play a high level basketball. Like I played high school basketball and club basketball in college, but it's still like that feeling of being on the court, that feeling of knowing how to make that like pass, just as like they're taking shots or rebound. Like I think it does play a little factor for them more so for you
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because they can see that and they can kind of sense it.
Yeah,
For
and
sure.
being able to relate, like, you know how it feels the day after you play a game. Like, you know how it feels to play a basketball game. You know how it feels to go through 2 hours of practice on the court. It's gonna make things a lot easier to relate to those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anyway, cycling around to one of the main questions I had for you specifically is you guys are coming back off, and I don't know, I don't know the situation down in Maryland or anything, but you guys are getting your athletes back at Coppin State. Are you back to training with your athletes and everything? And if so, what does day one look like? What does week one look like? What does month one look like? Because, and I don't know how the schedules have been pushed around for you guys, but this is unprecedented times. Like, what's your viewpoint look like?
Yeah. So to the first part, yes, you know, we are fortunate to be back training. Knock on wood, we've actually had our guys have had to quarantine once already because of one of our newer guys that moved in had a positive case, and everyone was kind of around each other that day. So we were actually originally it was broken up into three phases: local guys, and then the whole team. but it was going to be like super small groups, 3 or 4, and then 2 groups, 6, 7, 8, and then whole team in 2 to 3 week phases. That kind of got condensed because we weren't able to have everyone moved in as soon as we hoped. But anyway, we had about 3 really good weeks of training in with our local guys. New guys were moving in, transfers and freshmen, et cetera. And then we got shut down for 2 weeks because of a positive case in contact tracing. So then it's like, man, do we start back at week 1? No. We had done all, dumbbell, kettlebell, body weight, medicine ball, force absorption type stuff, just GPP, push, pull, squat, hinge, simple stuff. And we were just about to get to some real strength work and touch some barbells. And I'm like, shoot, well, they just probably did nothing for 2 weeks because they technically can't exercise if they're symptomatic, which none of them were. So they could do body weight stuff in the apartments. But I'm going to be real. I know our guys. I know they probably weren't doing much. And not being negative, again, just being real. And so I kind of had to bridge the gap between where we were and what I wanted to do. And so, of course, that was a little bit of a setback, whereas had that not happened, we'd probably be close to full team practice now. We're not quite there yet. We probably need another week or 2 because this is our second week back to training since that happened. So long story short, we originally had a 7-day introduction process. We kind of condensed that into a 3-day process. So of course, getting their physical, medical green light. And then between day 2, 3, maybe day 4, I kind of had a 3-phase reintroduction and assessment process. First thing being a movement assessment. Part of the functional movement screen, I chose the deep squat, active straight leg raise, and trunk stability push-up. So of course, deep squat, getting a pattern, ASLR, getting mobility, lower half, mobility, flexibility, and then TSPU, getting trunk stability, core stability. And I think all the FMS screens are valuable, but those for me were not just the 3 most valuable, but the 3 most actionable items. I never want to test. We talk about screening, testing. Well, what are you going to do with it? So those were 3 things I felt that I could take the most information and actionable items from. And then we also did some breakouts, kind of a joint by joint, ankle, knee, hip, lumbar, T-spine, shoulder, joint by joint, 1 or 2 assessments per mobility to see, okay, well, if they have poor thoracic flexion with their pectoral shoulder flexion, okay, maybe that's why the dowel is leaning forward, yada, yada, right? Mm-hmm. Just kind of use those assessments to break down maybe why their patterns weren't as good. Second piece of that was strength testing. And this I kind of took from the Dodgers with all their draft guys that came in, whether they were college or from Latin America. Almost everything was relative strength based, and it was pass or fail for 5 reps. So basically they would pick a percent of body weight that, was challenging but reasonable for whatever the movement was. And it would just be 5 reps, pass or fail, because 5 reps is kind of that area where, and there's some good research and literature on it, where you need 5, I forget what the wording is, basically 5 challenging, fatiguing reps to really create muscle growth. Not saying that hypertrophy can't happen with really heavy sets of 3 and whatever, but they felt 5 reps was a safe area where, guys might get sore and whatever, but they're not going to strain a muscle. It's relative based on body weight. And so anyway, I kind of took that form of testing to us, just given the pandemic and of course, hoping they stayed active, but not knowing if they did. So upper body chin-ups, upper body pull, we did chin-ups, and that was AMAP. That was as many as possible. Mm-hmm. Bench press, 50 for the girls, 50% of body weight for the girls, 75% of body weight for the guys. And lower half, 75% of body weight, rear foot elevated split squat. So between 2 dumbbells, 75%. And again, pass or fail for 5. And I would also take an RPE. So, hey, you passed for 5. Some people, of course, that might be a 3, it might be a 6, it might be a 10. So that RPE can kind of help me gauge and guesstimate, what their 1 rep max or their 5 rep max, if you will, would be. So that was that. And then we also did a landing assessment. 2 feet off of a 24, 1 foot off of the 12, just video, kind of subjective, but to see progress, especially with the new kids. And then the last thing was the beep test for aerobic fitness. Love a beep test just because there is the change of direction component. There's an increase in velocity component. So a little more sports specific, for lack of a better term, so we did that.
That term.
Yeah, we could go down a rabbit hole there, but so did that for aerobic fitness, and we'll kind of use that, of course, as the baseline and retest at least once, maybe twice, and I think I'm probably going to, for each team, set some performance standards like elite, and 2 or 3 different metrics or kind of subgroups, like guards, you're trying to hit this, forwards, bigs, you're trying to hit this. So that in a nutshell, man, is where we started. I know that was a lot, So we can go into that stuff more, or just kind of bigger picture, like where we're going with training from there.
I got a quick question on the landing
Please,
assessment.
yeah.
Sorry, Sean.
No, you're fine. Go for it.
So you said it's subjective. Are you just looking at like knee mechanics, ankle mechanics with the landing assessment? And if so, what more specifically are you looking at?
Sure. Yeah. So, their foot and ankle contact and interaction. Are they, of course, you should kind of strike ball of foot, but it's, to me, in my opinion, to save their knees. It may not be the most athletic, but I want a whole foot landing, so I'll teach like with snap down progressions and things like that. The ball of your foot will strike initially, but it should immediately flow to whole foot, and not heels, because that's not athletic, but whole foot, tripod foot, 3 points of contact, 3 points of pressure. So foot and ankle interaction. Knee, of course, more so for the ladies, but guys as well, if there's any valgus or varus, but of course, mainly valgus there, especially with that single leg drop from the 12. And then just how they shift their weight, so are they super knee dominant with a positive shin? And positive shin is good, it's athletic, but do they also have a posterior shift with their hips, which of course will bring their chest forward? How do they load their arms? And our returners, of course, look pretty good because we do snap downs a ton. It's part of our pre-court warm up. And, hands overhead, the hands to hips, hands to pockets. So returners for the most part were good because they're familiar with that stuff. But, new guys and girls are all over the place, especially with that single leg, just if they're not that strong, So foot and ankle interaction, where the knee goes, where the hips go, if the chest follows. And then just talk about, hey, you're not always going to be able to land, quote unquote, perfectly, or like I'm going to teach you in a game. But if we can teach the mechanics and enforce it enough, hopefully after a certain amount of time, it begins to carry over the court and save your knees a little bit of that stress.
Do you think for most of the kids that struggle with the landing is just general strength for most of them? Lack of strength, I should say.
I would say more so for the women, and not to, pick on the girls, but generally the girl ain't trained as much, just general anatomy, physiology, the female body isn't going to have as much muscle mass. So I think it's more of a weakness on the female side as well as hip anatomy. But also just if they've trained or not, because a couple of the new kids, freshmen or transfer, weren't that bad and were actually pretty good. And they're, usually the ones with the training background that had a strength coach. We have one freshman on the women's side who had a strength coach, I think all 4, maybe 3 years of high school. She's awesome. She has some little postural things to clean up, but she moves great. She's one of the pound for pound, one of the strongest girls on the team already as a freshman, and just started a month ago. Versus, some of the girls that are a little weak, little overweight, little out of place background, shows how valuable conditioning can. One thing I would do is with the landing, I did not, especially I didn't cue them. I wanted them to drop from the box. They knew what they're doing, but I didn't, foot, knee, nothing. And I didn't talk to them about it until for their group. They wouldn't, I just warm up land that. But, it's just CNS nurses and muscle. If I had cued them into it, we could have landed better. But if not, I'm going to be thinking on the court. So just how they move and how they land naturally.
Gotcha. Dude, that is very, very cool. Anytime I had an athlete that had any sort of extensive training background or a high school strength and conditioning coach that really cared about what they did, I made sure to reach out to that coach and basically thank them for their work for making my job a whole lot easier. That is undervalued in my opinion. So shout out to all the high school strength coaches out there that are doing pretty awesome work because that's underrated. I did want to get into something.
I'm making a note here, Sean. I got to start. No, that's a great idea, man. I got to start doing that. That's really good.
I wanted to get into a little bit of, and this is more subjective. Did you think the pandemic, the shutdown, was a good thing for the athletes? And I asked that as a basketball strength coach because all 3 of us know. Remember that shirt that said basketball never stops? That is so true in the collegiate setting. they truly don't ever go a day without putting a shot up. And we've always preached, take a rest day, and we try to preach it to coaches, so they just elongate practice over and over and over again. So like, it was that beneficial to the athlete to have that shutdown, whether from a training or just a practice load perspective going into a new season.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, Sean. It's a great question, man. And this is a little bit of an aside, but I'll preface it with this because it's good timing. I said to my buddy Charles, who's our assistant coach on the men's team, we try to train together every day. I said this to him earlier. I was like, man, I was thinking about it from a book I'm reading. It resonated with me this morning. I was like, I wish I spent more time during the quarantine doing nothing. And, you know, if you know me or follow me on social, like I was posting, especially the first few weeks of the quarantine, I was posting like 4, 5, 6 things every day, different books, and I was like so motivated, like, oh, this is great. I'm going to be so productive. And I said to my buddy today, I'm like, never again, hopefully, right, will we have 3, 4, 5 months where we literally have to stay in the house and do nothing. And like, there's so much to be said about that, just from a mental health, sure, but just like your spirituality, your stillness. The book I'm reading right now, Stillness is Key, talks about this kind of stuff a ton. So long story short, to kind of take that and translate it to my answer to your question in terms of student athletes. Yeah, I think it was great, man. Like, of course, from a training standpoint, yeah, they're not going to be as strong, not going to be as conditioned, they're not going to move as well. But basketball athletes, as much as any athlete that I know of or can think of, like, yeah, man, they go year round, you know, AAU, summer ball, you know, in season, high school, college, whatever team. It's go, as are most sports these days, because youth sports, you know, from the grassroots are so competitive now. But yeah, of course, they're going to be deconditioned. You know, they're not going to be as strong. And that's where I kind of want to get into like some of the exceptions we have to make and accept, at least for this year as strength coaches. You know, we're not going to be able to hit some of our maybe traditional standards in terms of how strong is strong enough. But I think, yeah, man, to ease up on their joints, to give them a break, let their bodies truly, truly recover, because we usually give them no more than 2 weeks, you know, 14 days, mandatory off period, boom, back to it. Let's go. So yeah, man, I think it was hopefully refreshing for everyone. And of course we're deconditioned, but as long as, you know, we don't have any more quarantines and all that, and we're able to continue to train and build our foundation, I think we'll be okay. You know, maybe we're a little more at risk for catastrophic injuries, but I think if we approach it the right way with our training, with our practice, et cetera, and our progressions, I think we'll be okay.
I like that. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
We got about 7.5 minutes left. Will, you got anything for Chris right now?
Well, I do, but I don't know if we have enough time for it to be really addressed. But I guess, yeah, I'll ask it. So, like, coming back from all these quarantines, like, what are you really focusing on specifically? Is it just general fitness? Is it tissue health? Is it performance on the basketball court? Or is it something totally different?
Yeah, man. Great question. And I got an eye on the time here, so I'll try to be concise with this. Right now, we're going 4 days a week: Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And most days we're in groups, so they're either come pre or post court. I'll adjust the prep a little bit based on whether they're pre or post. But 2 days a week we're doing so, you know, hinge, push, pull, bilateral, unilateral, anti-extension, anti-rotation, your pretty typical GPP type strength coach movement stuff. The other 2 days right now, again, especially for the guys, because of that 2-week quarantine, I'm treating as more of a quote unquote bodybuilding type day, like connective tissue health, joint, what's the word I'm looking for? Tissue tolerance, joint health, connective tissue, all that stuff. So like, you know, 1 or 2 sets, almost like a 1x20 method approach, but more joint specific exercises than movement specific exercises. Okay. So like, yeah, we'll do some curls, we'll do some extensions, we'll get something for the hamstring, something for the calf, TK, VMO, TKEs, like every little joint area I can think of that is probably going to be undertrained and valuable, which I mean is the whole body, of course, every joint. But just trying to get that, because we know connective tissue takes the longest to adapt. You know, like, sure, we can get them in a trap bar and lift them 300, 400, 500 pounds again, but if their joint structure doesn't have the integrity and strength and tolerance to support it, then so what? So basically 2 days a week, man, focusing on more compound movements and strength, and 2 days a week just trying to rebuild our joint, tissue tolerance, joint health, things of that nature. That's kind of my approach right now from last week, this week, probably at least one more week of that. And then we'll get into something maybe a little bit more aggressive if I feel like we're just in a good place, responding well, recovering well, et cetera.
Awesome. Cool.
Very cool. Very well explained too.
Thank you. Good. I tried to keep it simple and concise.
We appreciate it.
And just to touch on the conditioning piece, I'll put it out there simply. We're not doing any conditioning right now because I'll correct myself by what I'm about to say. In my opinion, and I feel like Joel Jamieson has said this because he's obviously great with conditioning stuff. Right now, everything we're doing is conditioning. Yeah. Like doing a block of 2 or 3 or 4 exercises in superset fashion, bang, bang, bang. Like that, they're getting an aerobic response from that. Their heart rate's elevated, right? Just doing half court skill work, with groups of 2, 3, 4, or 5, they're getting a conditioning effect from that. So these first few weeks, I'm just letting all that stuff cover conditioning. And then, once I feel like we have a good movement base and resilience, we'll begin to build in some of that stuff. We're doing some simple movement stuff in the weight room just to begin to teach some positions, but I don't think we need to really get up and down, at least for another week or 2.
Yeah. Very similar approach to what I'm doing with our guys at UND too right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm sure they appreciate not having to go up and down a couple times too.
Now, I will say our men are due for a little accountability training, as I like to call it, not punishment, consequences. So we may have to sprinkle a little bit in this week, but we'll see.
I like it. Never a bad thing.
Yeah.
All right, Chris. Well, first, Will and I wanted to thank you for spending the time with us today. And really our final question is, you've had a lot of people impact you throughout this strength and conditioning career that you've built yourself. And we've had a couple awesome guests so far, including yourself. Who should we get on here next? Who should we go reach out to?
Oh, man. Well, of course, I mentioned MJ, and he's, of course, I'm sure, everyone listening has heard him on one podcast or another. I want to try to think of some young strength coaches that I've had the chance to work around. Colin Kidwell, he's out in Hawaii, doing some amazing stuff. If you follow him on Instagram, he posts ridiculous stuff on a whiteboard that I don't even know what it means. He's doing some amazing stuff as the performance director with a military base out in Hawaii, as well as Colin Kolash is down at Lindenwood University, D2 institution, but they run it like a high-level D1, similar to Louisville in many respects. They have a really big staff there. So those are a couple guys that come to mind right away.
Very cool. I remember you introducing me to Colin, so thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, dude.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's all I got for you. Well, anything else? We have about 2.5 left.
No, man, that was a lot of good stuff, man. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and best of luck to you in your career, man.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, thank you guys, Sean. Will, thank you guys so much for having me. It's a pleasure. I hope everybody gets a little something out of this, and feel free, anybody listening, feel free to reach out. Email is cjhays, CJHAYS 15 at gmail.com, and of course on social, just C Hayes Strength. So happy to connect with anybody and talk shop and all that stuff. So thank you guys.
Yeah, we'll make sure that gets in the show notes and everything. So
absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks again, Chris. Thank you for everyone listening in. Hit Chris up at any of the socials. He'll get right back in front. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man.
All right. Thank you, guys.